I'm Elizabeth Teal-Mather, Senior Director of Communications for Norfolk Public Schools. Today we're going to talk about a very important topic, which is the development of the fiscal year 2013 budget for Norfolk Public Schools. With me today are Mr. Michael Spencer, Interim Superintendent of Schools, and Associate Superintendent for Budget and Finance, Mr. John Maniscalco. Thank you both for being here.
Pleasure.
So, John, I'm going to start with you. I'm always amazed at the complexity of the federal, state, and local funding for public education. For those of us who are not budget experts, could you talk a little bit about how that breaks down for Norfolk schools?
Certainly. The primary source of funding for Norfolk Public Schools comes from the state of Virginia and then the city of Norfolk. The operating budget is actually funded through the state and the city, and that breaks down approximately 2/3 state funding, 1/3 city funding. The state source is really our income taxes. And then at the city level, it's the real estate taxes and the personal property taxes we pay. So that provides the funding for the operating budget. But then we also receive funds related to federal grant programs. And those grants are the Title I and the IDEA. Title I funds are available to Norfolk Public Schools because many of our children come from homes with limited income. And then the special ed program dollars are found in that IDEA program.
Okay, wonderful. Thanks for that explanation. And so every 2 years, the governor of Virginia proposes a budget to fund the Commonwealth for 2 years, and that has some implications for public education. Could you talk a little bit about this year's gubernatorial proposal and what that means for Norfolk Public Schools?
Certainly. The governor's proposal is always presented in a 2-year biennial budget. The state of Virginia, under its constitution, has a formula that it uses to fund public education in Virginia. And that educational funding is based on average cost to deliver public schools in Virginia. And then those average costs are allocated out to the schools based on student numbers with some indices, a composite index adjustment to the wealth of the community. So it really is an equitable basis of reallocating those income taxes back to the communities to provide funding for schools. What the governor has presented in this year's plan includes some modifications to the formula that relate to basic aid. The base year is 2009-10 that the state is using as its point of record to fund schools. And the governor's proposal includes reductions to that base year because of some backfilling with federal dollars. In addition, he's made changes to the non-instructional support area by excluding inflation. And therefore, the funds we plan to receive from the state of Virginia are probably a little lower than they would otherwise be. The final component is a significant adjustment to the Virginia retirement system contribution, which is for our defined benefit pension plan. In order to protect the state's bond rating, the governor has proposed a rather significant increase to the Virginia retirement contribution that both city and state will have to pay for in our retirement payments.
And what other budgetary challenges does Norfolk specifically have this year?
When you look at the governor's proposal, there's some major components that it's actually created a $20 million shortfall when you look at the total revenues available to Norfolk Public Schools and the expenditures we would need to make in order to fund that plan, similar to this year's public school offering. And those items are made up of the governor's proposal to increase VRS. $10.8 million of our expense increase directly relates to that increased Virginia retirement system contribution. In addition, we're going to have to spend some extra money on textbooks, about $1.5 million, and that again is driven by the Department of Ed's formula. And then the school board has a desire to adjust the wage schedule. So part of their goals are we should look at the wage schedule, and we factored in currently about a 2% increase into the planning that's taken place to date.
Okay, thank you. Thanks so much for that background. Mr. Spencer, I'd like to turn to you now and talk a little bit about the challenges that Norfolk Public Schools has faced in the past several years to the tune of about $50 million over the past couple of budget cycles. Can you talk a little bit about how the school division has addressed those challenges?
Well, we've really tried to address them in multiple ways. First and foremost, I would say we've tried very hard to make sure that the core instructional program is not impacted in a negative way. And so most of our strategies really address things outside of the schoolhouse. So I guess some of the things we've looked at are, for example, in operations. We've deferred maintenance projects that probably should have taken place by now. Over the last couple of years, we've consolidated some schools, which saves some operational money. It certainly shifts around neighborhoods, but that's a big one for us. John mentioned 85% of our budget is built around personnel. And so when you look at a budget and $50 million of cuts, you have to look at eliminating positions, one, and the other is that we haven't adjusted our pay schedule for our teachers and other employees in the last 4 years. And so that would be another place that we've looked over the last 2 years. And probably the third is looking at programming opportunities. And a great example that I think most people would identify with, last year we looked at changing the staggers in schools. Instead of having 3 staggers referring to children going to school and the times they go, instead of having 3 staggers, 1 elementary, 1 middle, and 1 high, last year we moved it to 2 elementary, a middle, and a high, and that allowed us to cut down transportation costs. The downside to it was we have children that go to school earlier in the morning, stay later in the day. And so there are consequences to everything that we do there.
So, speaking of compensation for employees, the school board has addressed this, at least preliminarily. Can you talk a little bit about the school board's priorities and what direction that you've received from the
School
board?
board's been very clear with staff of what their goals are through this process. Number one is to make the instructional program, the core instructional program, the primary goal. To keep that as much intact as we can, because we understand that our primary mission is teaching and learning. So that would be number one. Number two is retaining and recruiting the talent that we want in the classroom, particularly teaching classrooms, positions. And so, as John mentioned in his previous comments, looking at compensation rates would be a goal for them. They're targeting right now about a 2% increase. That'll be the first one staff has seen in about 4 years. But also protecting instructional positions. Number three is looking at efficiencies within the school. I mentioned school consolidation, but other efficiencies that might be related to transportation, utilities, whatever it might be that will save us operational money that can go back into the instructional program. And then lastly is whatever we do with the budget, do it in an equitable manner so that children at the elementary, middle, and high school have the same relative level of services, and that different parts of the community have the same relative types of services. And all of that, again, the board's direction to us is to do it in a collaborative manner.
So all of that is very important, of course, and very challenging in a budget year like we're having now. How are you working with the staff to create a budget to present in February?
Well, we take the position that collaboration is key. Going back to the thought that multiple brains on this are better than one or two. And so starting off right in the classroom, we're engaging teachers through the teacher advisory committee and providing opportunities for teachers to talk about what's valuable in the classroom and what are those things we might look at modifying. Our principals have been involved at every stage because they're frontline, they know what's going on in the schools, and again, they know our resources as well as anybody and how we use them for the children. And then we have a very active conversation at the district level that involves all divisions, all departments, in putting everything on the table, basically, looking at programs and doing evaluations to see where some efficiencies might be, what are some things that we can take off the table to really make a difference in the budget.
Okay. So what would you like to convey to the staff right now?
I guess for the staff, there are a couple things. One is there's still opportunities for staff and the larger community to have input into this process. We have a very active website that staff can access and make suggestions. We have 2 community input sessions coming up, one on February 1st at Norview High School, the other one on March the 6th. Both of those will provide anyone that has some ideas about the budgeting of Norfolk Public Schools to give some input. But decisions haven't been made. I guess that's the most important thing to convey to staff. The other is that we're very sensitive about the impact of the decisions we make. We understand that jobs, livelihoods, hopes and aspirations are all on the table, and that being sensitive to that, we're going to move in a very thoughtful and responsible way.
So tell us about what you'd like to gain from the town hall forums.
Well, what we'd really like to gain is information from the community, the broad community, whether it be parents or residents or really students, about what's important to us as a community for our schools, and where we might look for efficiencies, and what we'd consider cutting, and what we really want to keep sacred in the classrooms. And so we designed our budget process a little differently this year. On February the 1st, we'll have really a conversation where community is invited to come in, talk about those topics, talk with the board about what's important. Then mid-February, we'll make a proposal to the board based upon all that input. On March the 6th, the community will have an opportunity to come back in and speak directly to the board in a more traditional format and respond to the recommendations. And it's really from that the board will make some final decisions.
Okay, well, thank you both for being here and offering those explanations. We appreciate it, and we look forward to seeing everyone on February 1st.
Thank you.